Okay, now we're doing homeostasis. So the human body works best at a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius with 100 milligrams per milliliter blood sugar level and a blood pH level of 7.4. The term homeostasis refers to the body's tendency to maintain a relatively constant internal environment. Mechanisms that make adjustments to bring the body back within an acceptable range are referred to as negative feedback systems. An example is exercising your muscles to produce heat, which raises the temperature of your blood. As a result, signals are sent to your control center, which direct effectors like blood vessels and sweat glands, which work to release heat from the body until temperature returns to normal. A positive feedback loop are systems that reinforce change, so they move the controlled variable even further away from a steady state to allow things to be accomplished rapidly. An example of this is the birthing process. So uterus contracts, forcing baby into cervix. Head presses into cervix, which stimulates impulses that are sent to the brain, causing the release of oxytocin. Oxytocin will then cause the uterine wall to contract more. This causes the cervix to send more impulses to the brain, releasing more oxytocin. This leads to even stronger contractions until birth occurs to make it faster. Then we have thermoregulation, which is the ability of an organism to keep its body temperature within certain boundaries, even when the surrounding temperature is very different. And then we have endotherms, which generate heat internally through metabolism to maintain a constant body temperature, and ectotherms, which rely on external sources of heat to regulate their body temperature, which fluctuates with the environment. A neuron is composed of dendrites, a cell body, and an axon. The axon sends a wave of depolarization along its length, which is part of the high-speed network that sends impulses from one part of the body to another. This wave of depolarization is primarily the movement of two positive ions, Na plus and K plus, from one side of the axon cell to the membrane to the other. A resting neuron is one that is not conducting signals, contains potential energy resulting from an electronic charge difference between the inside and outside of the plasma membrane. The cytoplasm inside the membrane is a negative charge, and the fluid just outside the membrane is positive. The membrane is said to be polarized. Like a flashlight battery, the difference in electrical charge carries potential energy, which can be measured as a voltage. The plasma membrane of the neuron keeps largely negative charged molecules, such as proteins. Pumps and channels in the membrane regulate the flow of Na plus and K plus ion. The cell maintains a higher concentration of Na plus outside the neuron membrane than inside, and a higher concentration of K plus inside the cell than outside. Na channels allow very little sodium to diffuse into the cell, but K plus can flow freely out of the cell, adding to positive charge outside. The diffusion of K plus out of the cell plus large negatively charged molecules trapped inside the cell causes the charge difference that constitutes the resting potential. A neuron has a resting potential of about minus 70 millivolts. There are two types of neurons: sensory neurons, which can be stimulated by chemicals, light, heat, or the mechanical distortion of their membrane, and motor neurons. And the neurons of the CNS are usually stimulated by neurotransmitters, which are chemically secreted by other neurons. Action potential is an axon is governed by the all or none principle. If an axon is stimulated sufficiently, the axon will trigger an impulse down the length of the axon. An axon can only respond or not respond. When a neuron is stimulated, a wave of depolarization is triggered. The gates of the K plus channels close and the gates of the Na plus channels opens, and Na plus moves into the axon. The input of positively charged ions neutralizes the negative charge in the axon. Transfer of action potential. The depolarization of one part of the axon causes the gates of the neighboring Na plus channels to open, and the depolarization continues along the length of an axon. Any region of the axon is only depolarized for a split second. Hyperpolarization is almost immediately after the Na plus channels have opened to cause depolarization. The gates of the K plus channels reopen and K plus move out. The Na plus channels close at the same time. This process, combined with the rapid active transport of Na plus out of the axon by the pump, reestablishes the polarity of that region of the axon. Restoring balance. The NAK pump actively transports more Na plus out of the cell than K into the cell, contributing to the buildup of the positive charge outside while keeping the concentration of Na plus low in the cell and the concentration of K high. This happens so fast that the axon can send many impulses along its length every second. The refractory period is approximately 0.001 seconds. General information. The signal moves at about 2 meters per second. The myelin sheath can increase the speed of the wave of depolarization and also the ability of the impulse to jump from one node of Ranvier to another. Now we're on to the synapse. So neurons do not touch each other. There are tiny gaps between them, which are synapses. The neuron that carries the wave of depolarization towards the synapse is called the presynaptic neuron, and the one that receives the stimulus is the postsynaptic neuron. The process. So when the wave hits the end, it triggers the opening of special Ca plus gates. The Ca triggers the release by exocytosis of neurotransmitter molecules. The neurotransmitter is then released by synaptic vesicles and diffuses into the gap. The neighboring dendrite has a specialized receptor sites, and the neurotransmitter attaches to these receptors and excites or inhibits the neuron. Acetylcholine is an example of a neurotransmitter found in the end plates. It opens the Na ion channels with which rush to the neighboring neuron and depolarizes it. The enzyme cholinesterase destroys acetylcholine, otherwise the neuron would be in constant state of depolarization. It would never be ready for the next impulse. Now we have the endocrine system and its importance. No cell operates in isolation. Body function depends on hormonal chemical control. A small amount of hormone can make a big impact. The nervous system helps an organism to adjust quickly to changes in environment, while endocrine system maintains control over a longer duration, so can regulate and sustain development for years. Hormones are chemicals released by cells that affect other cells in the body parts by speeding up or slowing down bodily processes. Endocrine hormones produced in glands and secreted directly into the blood. Some glands make multiple hormones like the thyroid. The type and number of hormone receptors varies from cell to cell. Example, liver and muscle have many insulin receptors, bone and cartilage do not. There are two types of hormones: steroid, which is made from cholesterol, diffuse from capillaries in blood into interstitial fluid and then into target cells. They combine with receptor molecules located in the cytoplasm. Hormone receptor complex moves to nucleus and attaches to DNA where it is completely shaped. There's a complementary shape. A gene is activated that makes a specific protein. And then there's protein hormones, so a chain of amino acids of varying length, insulin and growth hormone, combined with specific receptors on the cell membrane. This complex, the hormone receptor, activates the production of an enzyme called adenyl cyclase, which causes the cell to convert ATP into CAMP, which is cyclic adenosine monophosphate. CAMP functions as a messenger, activating enzymes in the cytoplasm to carry out normal functions. So the pituitary gland is the master because it controls other endocrine glands. It's a small sac-like structure that is connected by a stalk to the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, by the way. It produces and stores hormones and is stimulated through hypothalamus via nerve impulses to release hormones. It has two lobes, posterior and anterior. The posterior does not make its own hormones. It stores those made by the hypothalamus, such as ADH and oxytocin, and the anterior pituitary produces its own hormones which generally regulate other glands, such as thyroid-stimulating hormone, which causes the thyroid to produce thyroxine, and follicle-stimulating hormone, which is the development of follicles in ovaries and sperm in males. For the release of these hormones is related through nerve impulses from the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus also inhibits the secretion of hormones. So now we have the glucose control hormones. So we have adrenaline, adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, cortisol, insulin, and glucagon. So adrenaline is produced in the adrenal gland, the inner medulla part. It targets body tissues and organs, and its action is to prepare the body for flight or fight, increases heart rate, blood pressure, expands always for more oxygen, and releases glucose into the blood for quick energy. Then we have ACTH, which is produced in the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland, targets the adrenal cortex, the outer part of the adrenal gland. It stimulates the adrenal cortex to produce and release cortisol, which is a steroid hormone. It helps the body respond to stress, maintain blood pressure, and regulate metabolism. Then we have cortisol, which is produced in the outer cortex of the adrenal gland. It targets body tissues and cells. It is part of the long-term stress response. It increases blood glucose levels, breaks down muscle protein and fat for energy, and helps regulate blood pressure and metabolism. Then we have insulin, which is made in the beta cells of the pancreas. It targets body cells that absorb glucose. And what it does is lower blood glucose levels by helping cells absorb glucose from blood, promotes storage of glucose in liver such as glycogen, encourages fat and protein synthesis, and prevents the liver from releasing more glucose into blood. Then we have glucagon, which is made in the pancreas alpha cells. It targets liver cells, and it raises blood glucose level by stimulating breakdown of glycogen to glucose and releases glucose into the bloodstream. Then we have the metabolic hormones, so growth hormone, thyroid-releasing hormone, thyroid-stimulating hormone, thyroxine, calcitonin, and parathyroid hormone. So growth hormone is produced in the anterior pituitary gland, targets body tissues, and stimulates growth of bones and muscles, increases protein synthesis and cell growth, and promotes fat breakdown for energy. Thyroid-releasing hormone is produced in the hypothalamus, targets the anterior pituitary gland, and it stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to produce and release thyroid-stimulating hormone, which regulates metabolism, growth, and energy use. The thyroid-stimulating hormone is made in the anterior pituitary gland and targets the thyroid gland. It stimulates the thyroid gland to produce and release thyroid hormones, and it controls the body's metabolism, energy use, growth, and development. Then there's thyroxine, which is made in the thyroid gland and targets body cells. It increases metabolic rate, stimulates energy production, supports growth and development, helps regulate heart rate, body temp, and nervous system function. When there's low thyroxine, it's hypothyroidism. When there's high thyroxine, it's hyperthyroidism. Then there's calcitonin, which is made in the thyroid gland, targets bones and kidneys. It lowers blood calcium levels and helps maintain calcium balance, especially after meals. And then there's the parathyroid hormone, which is made in the parathyroid glands, targets bones, kidneys, and intestines, and it raises blood calcium levels. Then we have the reproductive hormones. So we have gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH, which is produced in the hypothalamus and targets anterior pituitary gland. It stimulates the release of follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Then we have follicle-stimulating hormone, which is made in the anterior pituitary gland and targets the testes in males, ovaries in females, or the gonads. In the males, it stimulates sperm production, and in the females, it stimulates follicle development and estrogen secretion. Then we have luteinizing hormone, which is made in the anterior pituitary gland and targets the gonads, so testes in male, ovaries in females. It stimulates testosterone production in males and triggers ovulation and progesterone production in females. Then we have estrogen, which is made in the ovaries for girls and there's small amount in testes in males. It targets uterus, breasts, brains, bones, etc. It promotes development of female secondary sex characteristics and a regular menstrual cycle. Then we have testosterone, which is in the testes in males, small amount in ovaries and females. It targets most body cells, promotes male secondary sex characteristics and sperm production. Then we have progesterone, which is located in the ovaries of the corpus luteum and placenta during pregnancy. It targets uterus and breast and prepares uterus for implantation, supports pregnancy, and regulates menstrual cycle. So we have the importance of excreting waste now. So ways your body eliminate waste is lungs from cell respiration, large intestine, liver and kidneys, and then more wastes from protein. So excess proteins are converted to carbohydrates. Nitrogen must be removed. This is done by deamination in the liver. Ammonia is very toxic. 0.0005 milligrams can kill a human. So fish remove ammonia through gills constantly, and in land animals it's stored. In the liver, ammonia is combined with carbon dioxide, making urea, which is 100,000 times less toxic than ammonia. Excretion in unicellular organisms are in direct contact. They are in direct contact with their environment, so waste excreted directly from cell, and they have a contractible vacuole to expel excess water so they don't burst due to osmosis. Now we're on to the formation of urine, which involves three functions: filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. So filtration is blood passes through a selectively permeable membrane. Each nephron has an independent blood supply. Blood moves through the afferent arteriole into the glomerulus, then out through the efferent arteriole. It dissolved solutes pass through the walls of the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule, moving from high to low pressure. The following are too large to move through the walls of the glomerulus: plasma, proteins, erythrocytes, and platelets. Then reabsorption occurs, so the transfer of glomerular filtrate from the nephron proximal tubule back into the capillaries and the cortex and medulla of the kidney. So this occurs by active and passive transport. Carrier molecules move Na+ ions across membranes of the cells lining the nephron. Negative ions follow positive ions by charge attraction. Reabsorption occurs until the threshold level of a substance is reached. Excess, NaCl for example, remains in the nephron and is excreted with urine. Glucose and amino acids use carrier molecules to shuttle them out of the nephron into the blood. Threshold level applies, so blood glucose causes excretion of sugar in urine. High amount of solutes being transported out of the nephron and proteins remaining in the bloodstream creates osmotic gradient, drawing water out of the nephron, occurs in the loop of Henle. As water is reabsorbed from the nephron along the loop of Henle, remaining solutes become more concentrated. Then more NaCl is lost from the filtrate due to osmosis. And then there's secretion, which is the movement of waste from the blood into the nephron. These include nitrogen-containing waste, H+ ions, some drugs, and penicillin. Cells loaded with mitochondria line the distal tubule, and tubular secretion occurs by active transport, but unlike reabsorption, molecules are shuttled from the blood into the nephron. Now we have kidney diseases. So diabetes mellitus is blood glucose is high, threshold levels exceeded, excess glucose remains in the filtrate, osmotic gradient cannot be established at proximal tubule, water that can't be reabsorbed stays in the nephron, becoming urine. Then there is diabetes insipidus, which happens when the body has a lower amount of ADH, so water is not absorbed in the distal tubule, which means more urine. Then there's urinary tract infections, which is caused by bacteria or viruses and more common in females. The symptoms is burning, painful urination, bloody or brown urine. And there's kidney stones, which are crystalline formations caused by excess calcium in urine, can be caused by low water intake, low activity levels. Some can pass on their own, some are blasted with ultrasound, and some are surgically removed. When kidneys can't maintain homeostasis due to nephron damage, renal insufficiency. This is when kidneys can't maintain homeostasis due to nephron damage. It can be caused by kidney infection, high blood pressure, diabetes. Nephrons can regenerate after short-term injuries. Dialysis and eventually kidney transplant are used when renal insufficiency becomes dire. Transplants are generally very successful. Okay, kidneys and blood pressure. Kidneys adjust for blood pressure. Conditions leading to increased fluid loss, like sweating or vomiting, decrease blood pressure. This is bad because it reduces the delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the tissues. The drop in blood pressure is detected by receptors in the juxtaglomerular apparatus found near the glomerulus, causing it to release renin. Renin is an enzyme that takes angiotensinogen, an enzyme made by the liver, and turns it into active angiotensin. Angiotensin does two things: constricts blood levels, which increases the blood pressure by decreasing the diameter of the blood vessels, and it also stimulates the release of aldosterone from the adrenal gland, which sits at top of the kidneys. Aldosterone then acts on the nephron to increase Na plus reabsorption. This then causes Cl to follow, increasing the osmotic gradient, causing water to move out of the nephron, thus increasing the fluid level of the body.